CQUniversity respectfully acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we live, work and learn. We pay our respects to the First Nations people and their elders, past, present and future.
Thanks for watching this video on listening to the voice. I'm Graeme Innes, Chancellor of CQUniversity. And who better to start this series with me than the co-chair of Reconciliation Australia, Professor Tom Calma AO, one of the co-authors of the report which recommended this process. Tom is an Aboriginal elder in Kong Arakan tribal group and a member of the Wadja tribal group, whose traditional lands are southwest of Darwin and on the Coburg Peninsula in the Northern Territory, respectively. Tom has been involved in Indigenous affairs at a local, state and national and international level, and is a member of the public service, or was a member of the public service, for over 45 years. Tom is currently on a number of boards, including Chancellor of Canberra University. So welcome to the first of this video series, Tom. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you, Graeme. And it's really good to be online and to catch up with you and also to share some thoughts with our viewers.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. Thanks, Tom. Let me ask you first up, how do you see the Voice to Parliament making a practical difference in Australia?
Look, I think it's a great opportunity, Graeme, to be able to change the way business has happened in the past. Now, what we've got to remember is that, the voice is not a silver bullet. It won't be there to overnight make significant change to Indigenous affairs. But what it does is set in place a framework or a mechanism to ensure that the voices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are heard. In human rights terms, that, if we can engage with the people most affected in policies and program delivery and get their views, then there's a greater chance of success. And we know that across the nation and across the globe, in fact, that where these practical solutions are put in place, then we get good outcomes. And, there's no end of examples. But I think, what it's going to mean, for me, is that we have a mechanism in place, a mechanism that is very representative of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from across the nation, because each state and territory will be able to elect 2 members to go on a national body, and that those 2 members will be 1 male and 1 female. And so then we've got a very great opportunity to have the national viewpoint, and that membership, as we proposed in the co-design final report, and this was the Voice to Parliament co-design process that Professor Marcia Langton and I led. We'll have those 2 representatives, plus we will have three people representing the Torres Straits, 2 from the islands and 1 from the mainland, and then all the states and territories with very significant remote Indigenous populations, they'll also get an additional place, so we can bring in the regional and remote, because they're very different, their experiences, to what we might be experiencing in an urban environment. So, that'll be there. But what we've also proposed, Graeme, which is, I think, something that we were very, very, happy in taking advice, and that is to set up 2 standing committees. One would be a standing committee of youth, and they would provide advice to the Voice membership, and particularly those Voice members, and a group representing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with a disability. And so, we are very overrepresented in the disability sector as well, as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And as you'd be aware, this is sometimes, everybody with disabilities tends to be overlooked, and or that we subject everybody to the same policy, one size fits all policy that won't necessarily fit all. And so I think that's another really important one. So overall, I think the voice is the mechanism. It's only to talk about issues that specifically relate to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And the referendum is just about the Australian Constitution, the Australian government, the Australian government departments and entities, and Commonwealth legislation. So, it's not to do with the states and territories. That'll come post the successful referendum. We'll establish the local and regional.
And Tom, we're not the first to do this in the world, are we? There's a number of examples of other countries where it's happened.
Oh, there are, and it does vary around the nation. What we're proposing is probably a little bit distinctly different to all of them, but it has the same issues. In the Sami, in the Scandinavian countries, they've actually got a parliament where, and it's a parliament by name, and it does provide advice to the Scandinavian governments in a number of different countries up there on issues that relate to Sami peoples. And so, but that's again advice that sometimes is taken up, sometimes it's not. We also have in New Zealand, they went a different way, and they had members of parliament and originally appointed 13 Maori members of parliament. But that when it first started was a very potent voice, but now there are so many other Maori members of parliament that the Maori Party doesn't have the same authority that it did when it first established. But in all cases, it's about providing advice to the governments, and advice to any party is sometimes accepted, sometimes it's not. And that's why this is a really important one, Graeme, because what we're proposing is that it's a voice to the parliament, and so that's the members of the government and all the other parties, the opposition, other parties, but also providing advice to the executive government. And so that includes the government of the day and their departmental heads and so forth. So, people say, well, look, why are you going down to departments? Well, what we don't realise, enough of us realise, is that many government departmental heads have a lot of responsibilities in making regulations, bylaws, and other very significant, I guess, programs and policies that impact on Indigenous people. So we've given it a lot of thought, and we've taken a lot of feedback from the community, both the Indigenous and the non-Indigenous community. That's why we're very confident that this will work, and it won't impede on any existing entitlements of people or infringe on anybody else's rights. And this is the important one, because you do hear that people say, oh, it's setting up a second class of people in the nation, and it's privileging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Well, it's not. Our constitution already does that. In section 5126, it enables the government, the Commonwealth government, the government of the day, to make laws specifically for all Australians, but it's only ever been exercised on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Law. So that's a significant difference. So it's the rule of law still applies to everybody. The Parliament still applies to everybody. So nobody's being disenfranchised. All we're doing is empowering Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to provide some advice to help government to successfully implement policies and programs. That's the end of the story.
Yep. Tom, from your own life experience and from your really deep knowledge, in this area, what causes you to support the voice?
Oh, look, you mentioned I've spent 45 plus years in the public sector, and I've also been a senior public servant, and did a number of years with you at the Australian Human Rights Commission when you were the Disability Discrimination Commissioner, and I was Social Justice and Race, and in fact you took over acting as the Race Discrimination Commissioner when I left that role. But there I reported very significantly about the ways government have implemented one-size-fits-all policies that don't work. I reported on how many program and policy changes occurred each year being generated from Canberra and then applied to Indigenous affairs. I established through my 2005 social justice report the Health Equality Campaign, which we then established the Close the Gap campaign, and that still prevails now. And that is to say that, we have to do things differently. We have to engage with people and to be able to make a difference. But all of that was predicated on stable policy, stable government, and consistent funding, and so forth. And so we haven't seen that. We've seen, just an ongoing change of prime ministers in the last decade, 2 decades since that policy came out, and it just is never stable. So we're never going to change anything with the status quo, and the status quo is enabling governments to change, and then ministers coming in to have a different approach. Whereas if we have a voice that's entrenched in the parliament, there's a lot more responsibility on all politicians, not only government, but also the opposition, the minor parties, and they'll have a very significant role to keep the government of the day honest. And they'll know that they have the backing of the Constitution. And that's a significant reason for me to get behind this campaign, to look at trying to make a difference by empowering Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to be able to provide advice. And look, this will change. I use an example often when I talk about the voice, and that is a program that I manage for the government or with the government, and that's the Tackling Indigenous Smoking program, which started in 2010 after I left the Social Justice Commissioner job. And that program is all about empowering the community to tackle smoking, and amongst Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Over 50% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people smoked, and it's now down to 37%, which has been a significant reduction in the last decade and a bit. And that's all because we have 40 teams across the nation. We had 40 teams, and each of those teams created material, worked with the community, guided by the community on what was the best strategy for the community. And ANU, in fact, have done some modelling on this, and they reckon that in this period of time, over 23,000 lives have been saved just in the last decade. It does show that when you have full engagement with the community, and programs are something that community can relate to and get behind, it's a no-brainer. This is nobody else can boast that sort of level of life saving in all the initiatives that we have. So, and that's just one example. Justice reinvestment is the other really top example that I use, and that's where we're now empowering the community, including led by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, to address justice issues. And in New South Wales, in the township of Burke, we've seen massive decreases in the crime rate and increases in the participation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in society. And it's moved away from being the epicentre of youth crime to now being a model example for the rest of the nation to follow on how it can go if we all work together, and not just focus on justice and, all this, we've got to be strong on justice issues. We've got to go back and analyse why are crimes being committed and then address all those determinants that impact on that. And so, they're just two real examples of how we can make a difference, and they're actually money savers. They're not, you invest now, but the amount of money that we've saved by people not going into chronic care or not going into the justice system is phenomenal. And this is why, I say all the time to non-Indigenous Australians, don't be scared of this process. this is good not only for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but it's good for the rest of the nation because it's a significant saving economically.
Yes.
And invest, and then you look at all the other, non-economic savings. They're just phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah. Tom, there'll be a lot of misinformation about the voice before we all vote. I mean, we've seen it already. How would you recommend people research this topic before they go to the polling booth?
Yeah, look, I think there's two things I want to say, Graeme. Well, probably more than two. One is that many people, many of us, we all have it, is what we call unconscious bias. That we come, we've been influenced by media over a lot of time. Media will put out a sensational story that looks at an issue but doesn't delve any further than the surface. And so that we all then say, oh, well, that must be everybody. Well, it's not everybody, and so behaviours are small in numbers, but they do have an impact. And I really accept that individuals are impacted, but knowing that we will make a difference. So that's the first thing is to address our unconscious bias, ask ourselves why we have this opinion of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and what's influenced us in that. And have we only been influenced by some of the sensational media reporting, particularly from the conservative media or conservative politicians, or are we willing, to take that one step further and explore a bit more? And it's one of the silliest things I've heard is the no campaign slogan that if you don't know, vote no. That's ridiculous. If you don't know, find
out. Yeah.
That's the key thing. We're all smart people, and anyhow, we need to look at that information. And so I'm glad you asked this, because there's a couple of really important websites that everybody should try and view if they're unsure and want to get it. One is the voice.gov.au website. It is a government website, but the information on there goes back to all the information that was on the website prior, under the former government, who endorsed it all. And
okay.
And so the voice.gov takes in all of the work that the co-design group did from 2019 to 2021, where we consulted across the nation. 9,500 people gave inputs into it through submissions and survey questionnaires or attending meetings and so forth. We visited over 100 or close to 120 communities across the nation and had all these consultations. So we got a lot of feedback from both Indigenous and non-Indigenous. All of our consultations were open forums. They were advertised well in the paper. So the information was there. And then the final report, which we tabled in July 2021, and the government procrastinated until December 2021, and then they released it unredacted. So, with that is that they must support everything that's in it, because ministers will often redact stuff if they don't like it.
Yes.
Said, and we thought actually that with the previous government that we were moving on these issues, but they didn't progress it as quickly as they could, and so nothing happened. But it's been in the public domain since December 2021. A lot of information. That's all on the voice.gov. And I stress that because this is not a Labor thing. The Labor took the next step to want to entrench it in the Constitution, and as both the previous government and the Labor have said, that is the co-design report will form the foundation of what the Parliament will consider post a successful referendum. So it's got that little endorsement. So, I don't know why people are complaining now, pollies and so forth, when they don't need to, and it's just confusing the public. But the other really important website is the AEC, the Australian Electoral Commission website, aec.gov.au, and I think there's once you get into that website, there's a specific portal on the voice. And what that is, why that one is really important. They've tried to really educate the community about a referendum, because a lot of people get a bit hung up over this, not enough detail. And what they've got to understand is that in the referendum, it's a principal statement that you make. It's a short statement. It doesn't have detail in there, and the detail comes, after the successful referendum. This is a standing practice, so people shouldn't get hung up over this, because the enabling legislation for the referendum and the question clearly states that it'll be the Parliament who will determine the composition, the structure, the operational aspects of the voice. So all politicians, government and opposition, and other minor parties and so forth, can have their big go at whatever legislation is being proposed post a referendum. But understanding what a referendum is, understanding how we govern, understanding the process of passage of legislation are really important. And I think people just need to concentrate, because they're not difficult, and the AEC website will explore all of that and answer those type of questions, which are really important for all of us. We've tried for years within the Human Rights Commission to have civics education out there, to get people to understand what their basic citizenship rights are and what human rights are. But it's never been adequately funded by government to be able to do that. And I think in part the politicians, might be a little bit fearful that if the community is too educated about what parliamentary democratic processes are, they might hold the politicians a lot more to account for some of their actions. And so that's the skeptic in me. It says that sort of stuff. But if they were really keen, they would be out there funding. So we as a nation have a better understanding, not an understanding, on the doorsteps of a referendum. And that's what the Recognise campaign was many years ago, to try and educate people. But, that was a change of government, change of strategic approach. So anyhow, those two websites are very good. And of course, you've got the campaign website so that you can get information off. And quite a number of universities now have produced some brilliant material to really unpack a lot of issues around the voice, so that we can all be informed. And, if nothing else out of this process, hopefully people will become much more informed and be much more engaged in our political system, because politics is about the people. It's not about the politicians, although they often will just think it's about them. It's about the people and how we are governed as a nation and our roles and responsibilities as a nation. And so, let's all get involved, let's all get informed, and let's all vote yes.
Well, Tom, that's been fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. I'm sure that the various people in and around CQUniversity will appreciate the explanations you've provided, and it's great to speak with you.
Oh, thank you, Graeme, and I think it's a great initiative that you're running here to help the university community to understand. And like a number of universities, there are really these sort of information sessions are taking place from the faculty level to the community level. And it's really important for everybody to understand is that, a university is a safe place. It's a place where we can explore issues in a place where both, for and against any issue can get their voice heard and say it. But let's do it respectfully, and let's do it in a way that we advance us as a society, not retard what we're doing and go backwards. This is a step forward. We can, and I often say that, people just need to reflect a little bit on Brexit that happened in the UK, that referendum in 2016, which was the vote as to whether the UK stayed within the European Union or they left it. That vote just got over the line, just over 50% of the people voted to leave, and that was in 2016. The latest poll in March this year shows that it's now about just over 60% of people wish they hadn't left. They've seen a drop in the economy. They've actually, it's been, a negative for Britain, and but that was, a bit of slick marketing by a few people and getting to the heartstrings of sovereignty and all this sort of issue, without exploring, the benefits of staying. And so what we're saying is that, look, reflect on that. Don't make a rash decision, folks. Really make an informed decision when you get up to vote, and be one decision that you own, because you're going to have to say to your grandchildren into the future how you voted and why you voted in this way. So let's do it together.
Thanks, Tom. Great to talk.
Thank you, Graeme.
The views and opinions expressed in this video are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.